Okay, so I'm going to start officially. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the first Brams-Otp Q&A. That's how we have called these sessions. And we are planning to have at least the months of September and October every 2 weeks this type of sessions so that people that are not that familiar with online testing or familiar with the Brams-Otp can join people that have a bit more knowledge, and we can all share what we are doing and what we plan to do in order to build up a community first, maybe, or something like that, and also share knowledge because this is even though it's a cool idea, it involves a lot of small different fields, right? Like programming, of course, psychology, neuroscience. So people are some people are experts in or are trying to be experts on these things, and but in other things that they are completely new to the field. So I guess the idea is to share, and if you find something that is useful here, please don't hesitate to ask questions or send emails. So that's the idea of these Q&A sessions. We will have other training sessions regarding other topics like JavaScript probably or HTML. So yeah, that's the plan. And for today, I have asked three of the people that is sort of started working with this platform or with our platform from the beginning, and they have agreed to share their experience in an informal way of what they are doing, what they plan to do, and why they are using this platform. So the first one is Michael Weiss. He's a postdoctoral fellow here at Brams, working with Professor Isabel Perez. And then we also have Peter Donhauser. If I'm not wrong, please correct me. You work with Denise Klein, and you work also at the Montreal Neurological Institute. And he's also one of the first ones that requested access to the platform. Hopefully he's going to share a lot of cool information with us. And finally, we have Nick Foster, another Brams member, and he started working with basically with me and Simone on this platform, so he's pretty knowledgeable of what's going on. So he's going to talk about a few of the possibilities and things that we are planning to do with the platform. So I guess each person is going to talk for 8 minutes. So I'm going to be really quick. I mean, this is it's already late, and then we are going to open the microphones for questions. For any doubts, any question that you may have, please just ask, and then we'll try to answer them to the best of our knowledge. So without anything else to say, I am going to pass it on to Michael Weiss. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this, Alex. So I already have my slides loaded up. Hopefully everyone can see the first one, or maybe you've read it already. I just arranged my slides in order of a few questions that Alex posed to us. So the first was, what is your online experiment about? And so the experiment that I was running is an assessment of absolute pitch, which many of you are maybe familiar with. It's the ability to really quickly name a tone that you're hearing without hearing any reference. So you just hear a tone and you have to really quickly identify it. So that's a very easy task. In theory, you're just playing an audio file and then collecting a response from among the 12 different pitch classes. But I found that there were a few extra considerations and kind of programming headaches along the way that I would maybe highlight. The first is that we wanted to present the task bilingually. So that sort of meant creating two different tracks of the experiment, one in English and one in French. Another was that we wanted pitch labels that could be presented in a way that was familiar to the user. So some people might be more familiar with like C, C sharp, D. Other users might be more familiar with like do, re, mi. And I also had a very particular way that I wanted to randomize the trials so that there wouldn't be any adjacent trials where you would get like maybe like a C followed by a C sharp or something like that. because then if you were really familiar with C, then you could tell what the C# was. So these were just extra issues along the way that made it a little more difficult. Oh, how do I advance? Oh, there we go. So the second question that Alex asked was, what was the framework that you decided to use and why? And I actually expanded it a bit beyond the options that he listed. So the very first thing I did probably was to create the instructions and stuff as image files, or at least some of them, because I found that if you have big blocks of text and you're editing them and maybe tweaking the words here and there, it's easier to just export the images again and again and have them have consistent file names. And then you can just import those anytime that you change your text. So that was one little thing I did before any programming. And then the actual programming that I used was, I used JS psych and some custom JavaScript functions for the experiment itself. So JS psych, if you're not familiar with, it is a JavaScript library where you can set up sort of a timeline of your study. So I want this event to happen, and then I want this screen to happen, and then I want this screen to happen. So you're sort of setting up the order of everything, including looping throughout your stimuli. It also controls the data collection in your study, so everything is sort of saved along the way into this data structure, and you can access it along the way. And of course, it controls playing the stimuli and recording responses and time stamping things, or taking reaction times and things like that. I also used a little bit of JavaScript to randomize stimuli to the rules that I had sort of alluded to before. And then after that, I used Jrose to act as a database where all the data gets stored and to send links out to the participants. And then after I have the data, I think maybe it was Nick who we were chatting about how you have to go in and like point and click to download your data. I don't think there's a way to automatically do that, which is a little annoying, but every time you download your data, you get all of the data together. And then I use an R script to kind of parse that into a format that I can do stats with. So it comes in, at least the way I have it, it's set up in an almost perfect JSON format. And then it needs a little bit of tweaking to get it into proper JSON format. And then I save it as just a regular old CSV file. So this is kind of like the collection of the different aspects of the study. And then when is my experiment going to be available? I actually have mostly finished the data collection at this point, so I wasn't going to post it up. But in the interest of just helping other people who are trying to set up their experiments, I've created a simplified version that you guys can all access on my website. So if you follow that link there, you should be able to get to it. And what you can do there from that link is you can actually try the experiment out. We'll see if that link works. It was maybe not working earlier today. But you can also download all of the materials that I used to make this task. So that includes the zipped up experiment. This is what you would import into Jrose, and then you could just run it. But I've also included the R script that I use to parse the data. So maybe you'll find that helpful. That was another headache. So if I can save you the headache, please use it. And if you have any other questions, you can email me. And then I think I had, a couple of tips that I would recommend, other headaches that I had to deal with. I would recommend saving your data trial by trial if that's feasible in your design. So I only had a few little bits of information to collect, like what button did they press, how long was the reaction time. So it was pretty easy for me to save that information, plus all of the information about the user every single trial. It wasn't transmitting too much data. And I would also recommend generating a unique ID for each participant. Sometimes if people click the same link again, or if they stop and they start again, you can get into kind of a data mess because maybe, actually I should fix this. It shouldn't say for each participant, it should say for each participant and session, because that was the real issue. If I had the same participant starting over and going again, it was kind of hard to tell where one session started and ended and the other one started and ended. But that's pretty much all I have for right now. So
oh, that's great. That's great. Actually, that was the right amount of time. So awesome. Maybe I can suggest that if you can copy paste that link on the chat window, later on people can, or not right now, but maybe after, you can put it there so that people just click on there because, yeah, right. So
okay.
thank you, Michael. So right now, then we go to Peter. You can tell us something about your project. Oh, I think you're muted. Yep.
I don't have slides, but
That's fine.
I'll just quickly talk about. I also don't have a real online experiment, but the idea of, the reason why I started looking at the platform was that one of my projects is looking at. I work with these clients, so we are interested in speech, and one project is to look at speech recordings, speech samples from, for example, patients. So we have database. Been collecting database of Parkinson speech recordings, like reading and sentence repetitions and these kind of things. And this was, of course, cancelled because of, stopped because of the pandemic. And we were thinking of collecting speech samples through the browser online. And another thing that a lot of the studies in the lab do is, the lab is interested in bilinguals, so we also collect speech samples from bilingual participants in both of their languages, like English and French, and then use it to judge the nativeness in each language, and kind of to put them on a spectrum between fully bilingual and somewhere in between. And so that would also include recording speech, but also someone has to rate those speech samples for example, nativeness. And so I basically used the platform to kind of try and figure out what is technically possible, and I used also the JS Psych toolbox, but there is no audio recording feature currently, so I kind of grabbed different snippets from the web here and there to try and figure out how to record audio through the platform, and it does work, and I don't think it makes sense to make a demo currently, but because you will not hear it anyway. But basically, it requires writing a plugin in JS Psych that uses the browser's media recorder, and so the participant will have to allow through the browser interface to access the microphone, which is kind of a common thing for certain pages. But in principle, it's possible, and the Jrose runs on a secure like HTTPS connection. And so I just wanted to mention, if anyone ever wants to record speech or any kind of audio from the microphone, then just ask me for the plugin I have.
So you actually wrote a JS Psych plugin.
There was some examples on GitHub, on people's GitHub pages, which somewhat worked, but not completely. So I kind of combined a few things, and so it works. It works perfectly on Chrome browser,
Okay.
But all these things are a bit different between browsers, I think. So there's a lot of headaches if you really want to make it happen among different browsers. So you just tell your participant to use Chrome.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a possibility. And then you can use it in the JS Psych kind of framework, trial by trial basis. So I just had like a sentence presented, and then the microphone records, and then you can stop the microphone and listen to your recording if you want to, and re-record if you're not happy with it. And then it's like it goes to the next trial. So it's set up in the same way as all the other JS Psych.
And out of curiosity, are you doing these recordings already on the server, on the Brams-Otp server?
No, so for now we've just used it within the lab to kind of record some stimuli here and there.
Okay.
Nothing like.
So it's not online yet.
Sorry.
It's not online yet. I mean, it's not. You're not doing the recording online yet.
No, so we've done recordings within the lab. We haven't. I mean, there's a bunch of things to figure out with ethics and amendments for doing this, and so this is really this is not going to go online soon, but it has been actually useful for some other things where we had to like record audio stimuli for a different experiment. For example, like where we just send out links to a few lab members to record words just on their laptop, and then collect those stimuli through the web server. But yeah, this is an option if that is of interest for anyone to collect audio.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So that was Peter telling us a bit of his project, and then I guess we're gonna go on to Nick, and he's going to tell us something exciting, I'm sure.
Don't get the expectations too high. No, this is probably going to be the most off the cuff of the 3 presentations, but I thought it might be useful and kind of easy to, especially, I mean, it sounds like everybody's gravitating towards JS Psych, probably for the same reasons that Alex and I have. If you have a little bit of kind of basic HTML, JavaScript understanding, the way that the framework is set up just makes it extremely straightforward to start programming your experiment. So I'm going to try and keep this kind of not so technical, because I don't think that's necessarily the point of this meeting, but for those of you that haven't really kind of dived into JS Psych, this might be a useful kind of first taste of how things look. So which one am I starting with? This is the BPM task. Okay, so the idea in this task, this is a very basic kind of, we present an audio stimulus and we ask the participant to make an untimed response. In this case, we're playing metronome sounds at a range of tempos between 80 and 160 BPM and asking them to estimate the BPM of the metronome that they heard. And this kind of a variation on a task that we've done to kind of look at DJs and compare them to percussionists and musicians and untrained individuals, where we expect the DJs to have some kind of skill in estimating the BPM just from hearing it. So yeah, I mean, the structure is basically, we have, I think, 30 trials, and we play a metronome, and then we present a text box and ask participants to enter their response, and then we proceed to the next trial. There's some randomization involved. So most fundamentally, the file exists as an HTML file, or the task exists as an HTML file that contains some HTML, which kind of structures the is a container for the JavaScript and the CSS styling information, and also kind of has some of the visual structure and layout involved in what is presented in the browser. This HTML file is sent to the participant via Jrose if you're running in the Jrose environment. But while the task is running, it's basically whatever is in your HTML is driving the progression of the experiment. So there's the header section where where any styling information CSS will include. JSPsych has a default CSS file, so we include that. Although, of course, you can kind of further customize things with CSS, for which there are a billion tutorials out on the web. If running in the Jrose environment, we include the Jrose JavaScript file, which provides the functions that we need in order to, if we need to retrieve any information from Jrose about, for example, the Jrose assigned ID for the participant, or other things, then this library provides those functions. And also at the end, of course, we want to save our data back into Jrose. And so the most important step is to call the Jrose function that sends the data, and then it will be retrievable in the dashboard after that. The rest is JSPsych, if we're using JSPsych. So there's a JavaScript file for the kind of basic JSPsych library, and then there are plugins. And you choose there are a number of preset plugins that you can choose among that handle basically all of your basic use cases of presenting some text or an image or audio, and then collecting a button response or keyboard response. More fillable kind of form type elements that would be useful if you're implementing a questionnaire. In this case, we want to present audio, and then we're going to collect the response with an HTML form that has the text box in it. So the stimuli are in audio files. So we prepare those ahead of time, and those are in a stimulus directory. And we want to randomize in this task BPMs between 80 and 160, and files exist for every integer BPM between that range, but we want to randomly choose 36 of those. So JSPsych has some built-in randomization and sampling functions, and we end up using one of those. First, we create an array in JavaScript just of all of the integer values. Then we use the JSPsych function to sample 36 of those from that list. And that's a BPM list, which we can then use to set up our trials on the timeline. The trials, or kind of like the successive moments or things to be done in the task, are basically elements on a timeline in JSPsych. And you can have nested timelines. I think if I don't kind of spill over my time allotment, I can talk about how to do, we've looked into how to do conditional trials, or how to loop things until a condition is met. If you have some kind of conditional logic in some trials or instructions or responses should be collected under some, depending on what the participant does, it's fairly straightforward to do that. And I've made an example which I can share with everyone, whether or not we get to it here. But basically, so we set up our, here's a timeline that I'm calling trials pre-task. I forget why I have multiple timelines here. But we have a kind of a welcome screen where you use, on each item that you're putting on the timeline, it corresponds to a particular plugin, which you need to include all of the ones that you're going to be using in the header. So that's just the name of the HTML button response plugin, which presents whatever in HTML, which could be text, images, etc., and then collects the button response and returns the data and saves it. So here we have a kind of a welcome screen to continue. This is the demo version of the task. Then we have the actual instructions. Here, I put that in a function just so I can put it later in the file and not clutter up this part of the code with the actual content of the instructions. And doing it this way could also be useful. Like Michael made a really good point about the need in many experiments to kind of have multiple languages or to adapt the instructions in some way. And so perhaps you could have several different, you could have like JavaScript objects that basically just have by a coded name for each piece of text, the value in one language, and you could switch between, just load in different files that all have the same labels so that you're just referring to the text by those labels in your actual script, but you could have multiple sets translated into different languages. I wonder if that's how we did it, but that's how I would do it here. And then you can kind of abstract that away by just having a function that handles selecting the correct text in that case. Then we want to build all of our trials, which in this case, we want to present the audio. It was most to kind of work with what JSPsych already gives us. They have an audio button response plugin, and so we present the audio using that plugin, but then we just immediately end the trial, like in the context of the timeline in JSPsych, as soon as the audio is finished, and we proceed immediately to another trial, which is the one that we're actually collecting our response. And so here we're using the survey HTML form plugin with an input box that collects the response. And here, I think this is probably where I'll kind of end off before this gets too long, but we save the responses, and I think, no, this is the demo version of the task. There's another version where I have progressively saved, as Michael mentioned. I also had the same worry that if you're waiting until the end of the task, kind of the final kind of thank you screen, before sending your data and then returning to Jrose, what happens if the participant closes the browser before then? You don't get any data, and maybe you would wish that you had partial data. And so what you can do is you can retrieve the data for each trial. At the end of that trial, there's a Jrose function where you can, rather than replacing the saved data for the task, you can append to it. And so you just keep appending, the data that you save could be in any format. Probably JSON is the most flexible way to do that. And you end up with a series of kind of lines of JSON saved into your output. The approach that I took was to clearly mark at the beginning of the task that it's partial data, and then to save trial by trial, send the JSON of the results of that trial back to Jrose. But then if we make it to the end of the experiment, then I simply save I retrieve the full result data from JSPsych, and then send that back to Jrose and replace what I had before. And now the marker that I had set that said that it's partial data is no longer there. And so in analysis, we can know that we're dealing with a complete data set when we retrieve it from Jrose. So, okay, that was a bit haphazard, but I'll end there, and maybe if people have questions, I can get into more of the nitty-gritty. And I will share, I think this will be useful for people, the conditional, kind of implementing conditional logic in the context of JSPsych. I have a demo that kind of shows some different ways and some also limitations of the different approaches that you might use with conditional timelines and looping timelines and things like that. So I can share that after the workshop.
Oh, thank you, Nick. So that's it for the presentations. Michael has given us a quick overview of his experiment, all the framework that he uses, and a few tips. Peter is recording speech, and Nick has given us an example of the kind of the rough part, which is the coding part and all the details that go behind this experiment. So that gives an overview of what it takes to prepare an online experiment, especially in HTML, and the JavaScript, in the HTML JavaScript framework. So at this point, I would like to invite anyone that is in this session to ask questions, doubts, or if you have nothing at all and you are just starting your experiment, you can actually ask any doubts that you may have, or if you have any particular questions, specific questions for each of the people that has presented today, please go ahead. You can do it on the chat window, or you can just open your microphone and ask a question. So yeah.
Hi everybody. Just thanks so much. I just wanted to say hi because I feel like the format of those Zoom videos sometimes is a bit informal. We think that we're talking and there's nobody outside, but
yeah,
it's so thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I had a question related to the choice of GS Psych. We're doing some experiments online as well, and I have not yet used the Brams-Otp. We just used Pavlovia. So the reason why I liked Pavlovia is that it's supposedly the direct continuation of psychopay. So psychopay is an interface that is very graphical, a bit like a Visual Basic, if you have experience with Visual Basic. So you can just like design your experiment. You have a flow of the routine. It's very easy. You don't need any programming experience to do so, especially for students in psychology who don't have necessarily the engineering background to code in the first place. And so that's actually what I'm teaching. I'm teaching programming in psychology, and I'm basing it on the psychopay platform, and that requires learning Python, which is not like the easiest language in the world, but it's at least like going from Python to Java is, if you keep remaining within the interface and you ask to try to translate automatically, and you have not inserted much of your own code, it should do it automatically. And that enables people to do online research without having any experience of Java coding in first place. And I found this very useful for that exact reason. So my question to you guys is, because you seem to have some experiences with Java in the first place, but if you had no experience, would you have chosen GS in the first place, or would you have gone with another language? Or why choose?
I can try speaking to that. So within Simone's lab, you know, we have a few kind of online tasks in progress, and we have students that don't really have either have kind of basic, very rudimentary coding experience, but not in JavaScript, or no JavaScript experience. And we're finding that they, you know, at least for the kind of basic types of tasks that we've done so far, they come up to speed pretty quickly. The building blocks with JS Psych, you know, are quite straightforward. As long as you're trying to do something that JS Psych already provides in terms of the plugin elements that provide functions, then it seems to be pretty straightforward. And you know, it helps having someone who does know JavaScript to help them along a little bit. But the initial kind of getting started learning curve doesn't seem to be very steep.
I am. Okay.
But I think it really, like, this is the question of JS Psych or something else. I think really depends on what you want to do. And if you're doing a lot more kind of, I think there are a number of different types of experiments that probably psychopay and its kind of psychojs conversion provide the kind of building blocks. You know, like my first experience programming tasks was in presentation, and you know, you kind of on a trial, like you say, okay, I want this to happen at this time, this to happen at this time, you know, collect this, here's the logic of, do we keep the first response or all responses or whatever. You don't have as much kind of blank page flexibility in terms of how you construct a trial that way in JS Psych. Although I did find, it's not part of the kind of provided plugin set, but there is somebody who, I wish I remembered the name of it, but has programmed a plugin that seems to actually function in much more the way like that I described from my experiences with presentation, where you can say this happens at this time, this happens, you know, here's a visual thing that happens at this time, here's audio that happens at this time within a trial, without having to hodgepodge together multiple plugins, as I've done for some things in JS Psych with the built-in plugins. Long story short, like, you know, if you already have a process where and some expertise that lets you get going in psychopay, and like you said, if you don't have a lot of custom Python in there, because that's going to need rewriting into JavaScript, I think. The other parts will get converted.
Exactly, that's the main issue. I think the formula we followed works well as long as you're willing to sort of stay within the boundary of what psychopay has designed for you, which is never enough. You always want to do something that was not pre-designed for it. So then, like, you would spend a bit of time, and we've done it. Like, we've wasted probably a week, 2 weeks, trying to go from one to the other because some functions would not be known or something like this. And so, but I still find that, like, that's a quicker process than I'm talking about somebody who has no experience, you know, like somebody who's just like a typical student in psychology, might never have coded anything. And then, like, you're like, okay, just like write a JavaScript and just use this. They are like fairly straightforward. I think it's very far from being straightforward for that student.
Well, I mean, in terms of the OTP, Jrose will happily present your psychojs experiment if you upload that. Like, it just needs the hook at the end to send the data back to Jrose, which is a one-liner, and you need to include the Jrose library. So the steps to take a working psychojs experiment and have it run on Jrose is like one step. So I think if the task that you want to do if it makes more sense as a starting point to start with psychopay and, you know, do any little modification you need to get it to run in psychojs, then by all means, I think that's probably a better starting point. If you're doing a simple experiment where you don't need kind of multiple things happening within a trial, and the types of, I guess, responses that you're collecting fit nicely into what's provided with JS Psych, then I think that is also a straightforward way to do it, and it doesn't seem to be kind of an impossible learning curve even for complete neophytes. But it really depends on what you're trying to do, I think, and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of JS Psych and psychojs would be a good starting point to kind of choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And maybe a final word on recruitment. What was your strategy for recruiting?
At the moment, on our side, we're in development basically for all of the tasks. And so, I mean, our recruitment will probably be kind of, we want, for our experiments, we generally want to kind of target and recruit our participants the conventional ways, like, I guess, through social media primarily, but to screen them before they get to the task, rather than it being an open to the public task and somebody just kind of ends up there however they end up there. And if you need to contact them, you need to collect their contact info at that point. So we're probably going to kind of do recruitment much the same way as we have, but kind of more adapted to trying to get have visibility for publicity online for people to contact us, but there would be kind of a screening process, and the consenting will probably do prior to giving them the link to do the task on the interview. That suits what we want to do in those studies. But of course, you can, if you have a task where you don't, there's no need to do that, those initial steps before they end up at the task, then you just want to publicize as widely as you can online, I think, and provide the link for people to jump straight into the task. So
you have not had a need to pay services, Empiric or Prolific, or any services that would give you a fee? So we used Prolific, and so it's not a bad deal. I think it's the fee that they give is like maybe $1.8, I think, for each recruitment. And so if we pay, I don't know, £5, it's a UK based site. Yeah. So if we pay, I don't know, I think the minimum is £5.8 or something like this. So it's getting close to maybe $10, and the fee would be maybe like $2, maybe something like this. So, but we've had good, I mean, we've had to put to the bin like maybe, I don't know, 20 out of the 100 that we had, but it was really, really nice in the sense that we opened the study at 6 p.m. and at 8 a.m. the next morning, we had our 100 participants. Just like in a heartbeat, 100 participants, boom. And out of those, like, I would say it's a good rate. Like, yeah, we throw away maybe like 20% that don't seem to be too good, like reaction time implausible, data that are too good, cheating, suspicion, stuff like this. So we throw away some data, but it was still like pretty good. And I've heard echoes of other people using mTurk. I don't know if you heard about mTurk. It's another recruitment services like Prolific. But people starting to worry whether like bots could have been like taking part of in your experiment. So depending on what your experiment is, you know, if you have a bit of free typing words and stuff like this, it's hard for a robot to like make up words that would be plausible. But if your experiment is just like clicking on button, like Michael was saying, like the identification of like absolute pitch, for example, where you could just train a machine to just click on things. I could imagine the possibility that people would try to create machines to take part in your experiment, and the data that you collect are completely bogus. Have you had any echo like this?
Well, I guess I can say we have, as Nick said, we haven't gone that far yet, but I guess, do you have, Michael, anything to share about, because you kind of overlapped the timing of the pandemic and doing this online testing, and you were already using Jrose before we actually started with the whole project. So how did you deal with your recruitment?
Yeah, I think maybe we had a special case. So I was hosting a Jato server on the cloud, just myself, before the Brahms one was available. But for this absolute pitch study, it was almost a follow-up measure that we started collecting because participants had already come into the lab and done some other tasks. And then we realized, well, we shouldn't just ask them about their absolute pitch, we should actually test them. So it was kind of a retroactive recruitment, not a real recruitment.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm very skeptical of mTurk. I'm very skeptical of any of those online systems where you can just put a link up and then get anonymized or almost anonymized participants. Because you know, there are a lot of people who program bots, or maybe they just click through and they just want to get the money as fast as possible. So you have to build in a lot of quality control if you're doing that. If Pavlovia has been working for you though, and if you have the right quality control, then it sounds like that's not a bad option. You know, 80% data in one day is pretty good.
So do you have a reference for this? It's probably, I'm just too naive, but I just like, it seems like programming a bot to like run some, I mean, I guess a lot of people are going to do online research now, so maybe it's a lucrative business, but it's still a lot of effort, you know, to like trying to program a machine, to trying to take part in some experiments and not be spotted by those kind of quality control. Like, I mean, why not? If you're like willing to go that far, why not just like doing something more ethical and still make a lot of money with it? It just seems like. So do you have any reference or any sort of newspaper article or anything that would explain or trying to explore the size of those threats?
No, I don't. I'm hesitant to use those services because I've just anecdotally heard that you can get some pretty bad data if you're not careful. And also I haven't had to use them, I should say, because, you know, in this case, we already had recruited people. So I haven't reached that point where, you know, we need to cast the net out again, but I don't know. There's nothing keeping us from recruiting the same way that we always have. It's just that the task is now delivered online. That's the only difference.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, I apologize. I need to rush, but thank you so much, guys, for all your inputs. It was very useful.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So if anyone else, we're almost at the end of this, but if anyone else has a question or suggestion from the people that are in the group here, maybe not yet. I can do say that Jrose 3.57 is out. So if you're using Windows, please use that because it has corrected a bug that that didn't allow Windows path files to show up correctly. So 3.56 is no good anymore. 3.57. We are using 3.54 in the server, so it's still good. It works fine. But of course, if you are testing in your local computer, and if it's a Windows computer, yeah, you should go for 3.57. I just wanted to say that. So here we have a well, Joasier, thank you to you for being here. Here, Michael just posted the link on the chat window, and then Nadesh is asking who is best to contact to find a specific plugin to build our experiment. The best from the three people that are here. I don't know, the three of them.
I mean, if the question is to kind of find, you know, JSPsych comes with a selection of built-in plugins, and so my approach so far has been to find the ones that kind of most that match what I want to do in the experiment. And in some cases, I'm kind of, you know, I used an audio button response plugin when I only wanted to present the audio, and so I just bypassed collecting the button response. So that would, the first starting point would be to go to the JSPsych site, which has really, really clear documentation and a list of what's available and describing what it does, and see how close you can get with the existing plugins. The next step would be, if you want to do something that's beyond those, see if, just do a search to see if somebody else online has maybe on GitHub put up their own plugin that does what you want to do. If you still need to kind of do something that has that is not already available, then you're looking at probably taking a plugin that gets some of the way towards what you want to do and customizing it. And at that point, it's, you know, you can see if you can figure out how to do it, or those of us that have a little bit of experience already in trying to do that could maybe give some advice in that process. But that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, I think the documentation for JSPsych is pretty good. And actually, it's going back to what Mikhail was mentioning about psychojs and psychopay. I do find it a little bit clearer on how to start, for at least if you're starting with JavaScript, to work with JSPsych. That is why we are using that. I would, as Nick said, I would suggest going through a few examples and see if they work for us. I mean, a few plugins can do the same thing for you. There's no just one plugin for just one thing, and then you can tweak the way the other ones behave so that you can find whatever you need. So that's a lot of trial and error, I would say, to find the right plugin for you. And if you need to build one, of course, then you can search online or ask. Yeah, no problem. So if we are still have a few minutes left. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's my bad. Are you going to put the recordings of the sessions on the website? I was just able to find the slides of this first session. Yeah, I have the video, and I still haven't cleaned it up in the sense of just wanted to tweak a few things. But yeah, I'm gonna put up the video really soon. And actually, that's a plan that we have for the next few days. At least the plan that I have is to put more information on the website. I've at least the demos and zip files that you can actually import into your local Jrose installation. And because I think that's a good way to start, just grab a code and then make it work, and then from there make changes and see if it can do something that is more closely related to what you are trying to do. So yes, I apologize if I didn't do it earlier, but yes, I will put the Brams training session, the first training session online, and this session that we're having right now, they both will be online for sure. Thank you. Well, I guess just to wrap up, first I want to thank Michael, Peter, and Nick. It's been great that the three of you are here. And we are going to try to do the same thing 2 weeks from now for the people that are not here, and or for the if you have more questions, or if you know someone that had been in the Brams training session and couldn't attend this Q&A session, please pass the word that we're going to be here. I mean, maybe not the same people, but I'm going to ask other people that are already using the Brams-Otp to present, and you could see different approaches on how you could make use of all these resources. So this is going to happen 2 weeks from now. That would be, let me tell you exactly, October 1st. We'll have another Q&A session, and yeah, everybody's invited. And please, if you have lab co-workers, tell them that, I mean, they can join us in this Q&A session, so that everybody gets some info about the Brams-Otp. So if we don't have any more questions, I think we're gonna call it a day. Well, thank you guys for being here. And again, if you need, if you need anything from the online testing platform, just let me know, or let Nick know, or at the email otp@brams.umontreal.ca, where I'm always checking that email. And that's it. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thank you, man. Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.